All right, we're going to be going over a little bit of the effects liquid. I don't know how many of you guys have used Origin liquids? Yeah. Do you still do, or some people used to dip when white was the only thing you could get, and then once multi-layer came out, they kind of stopped dipping, or sometimes maybe you add a little characterization on it, probably depending on the case. Yeah, so we're going to go over some techniques that I think really make the zirconia blend really well with the natural oil environment. How many of you guys remember your first zirconia crown that you stained and glazed? Yeah, long 15 years ago? Yeah, was it pretty?
Oh, mine was gorgeous. But
yeah, was it translucent?
I'm joking.
Yeah, was it translucent and opaque? The first one I did, I remember I had a set stain. It was like a A3.5, and the first zirconia you couldn't stain or color or anything. And it was just like refrigerator white, so I did about 8 set firings, and it looked like my kids smeared mud on the refrigerator, and I couldn't believe the doctor would want anything that looked like that. So that was my first experience with zirconia, and then we did abutments, of course, and then we did layering like everybody else did. But as soon as translucent zirconia hit the market, boom, it was like, how can I make this thing look or even be compared to a layered crown? And so that's what we're going to talk about, is how to really make your full contour monolithic look layered, and that we're going to actually work in stages in layering. So I'm just going to get right into the staining portion of it. Effects liquids. You guys familiar with all the colors and things? So if I just have a standard shade, A2, whatever it is, I am pretty conservative the way I approach my coloring. I use white primarily for all my singles, monolithic, zirconia, and even my big cases, all on 4s, I use white primarily. That's just one of my preferences. This is a white versus a multi-layered. This is, I think, an A1, so a little bit different here. I don't know if you guys can see that. This one's white puck. It's pretty conservative as far as the shading goes. So anyways, those are just samples. So I'm sure you guys have done something similar to this, or maybe done exactly the way that I'm showing you guys. I'm not claiming to be the only guy that does this. So what I start with is always, you have to keep this in mind, you have clean hands. You guys know, no oil on your hands, right, or gloves. I start with the color that I want to contrast the most, and I'm thinking about that. The saturation, how much it's going to saturate and infiltrate into the zirconia, and I'm going to, all the colors I'm adding on, that's kind of the whole thought process behind it all, because I want it to look like it's layered. So when I start the enamel, I have the tip of my brush kind of going halfway. Sorry guys. Let me see. It's hard to focus on this one thing. Come on. Is that going to focus? All right. Well, so I don't leave much space, but at least the width of the tip of the brush I leave kind of as a transitional area so that it fades. I don't know if anybody's ever told you that there's no straight lines in a tooth. There's no straight lines anywhere on a tooth. And if you make a straight line, then it starts to look fake. So when I have a fairly wet brush, but I dab it off or scrape it off a little bit on the side to keep control over it. I don't use a sable brush. I use a synthetic brush because you get better consistency with how the liquid comes off the brush. You just get better control with a synthetic brush.
And you're using what right now?
This is enamel 2. I'm doing like an A2 shade. And so I go all the way around the incisal. I'm kind of spinning the crown as I go. And I'm doing about 1 coat all the way around, okay? Then I'm going to go around. I'm thinking about saturation. I want the saturation on the incisal edge to be, it has that translucency right at the incisal edge. I'm going around that occlusal table on the outside, the occlusal table, kind of framing it with this incisal translucency. You can do this with blue, you can do this with violet. It all depends on what's your shade. Let's say you have a D2, maybe you go over the facial a little bit further down, and maybe you do a little bit of violet at the incisal edge to kind of give it that look of a D2 shade. And then you dip it at the end. So I'm thinking about contrast. And I want my enamel to contrast with my dentin. So when I start doing the occlusal anatomy, I stay out of the grooves because I'm going to come back in with my orange. I want chroma to be saturated as much as I can in the deepest part of that pit and that fissure. So I stay out of the dissectional grooves and keep it if I can. Sometimes, and that's another thing why a synthetic brush works really well, because you can control that tip a little bit more than a sable brush, and you can control the flow off the brush a little bit better. So, and then again, I'm going to go around the occlusal table again and just saturate that incisal edge a little bit more on the inside of that occlusal table, and especially on the marginal ridges. Sometimes I put blue on the marginal ridges. I'll take the blue color and I'll put a little bit on the side and then a little bit on the edge. Let me see how. You guys see that? Let me get it to focus. I think that light's kind of killing it. There we go. That's a little bit better. You guys see that? So I stayed out of the grooves because I want orange and chroma to saturate those grooves. There, that's better. Oh, that's even a lot better. Okay, so now that I've saturated or maybe put my blue on, put my violet on, I'm going to rinse the brush off. I'll use a smaller brush. So I didn't bring my other synthetic brush, but typically I use a smaller synthetic brush, but this is a little bit of a sable brush. Oops. All right. So now I'm going to go with. No, it doesn't. Yeah, it didn't show up as much. Watch this. See, Daniel, watch. See, now you can. It didn't focus when all the light was on it. See that? So it would only focus, and you could see it better when there wasn't. There we go. Let's try that. There we go. There we go. That's better. Okay. So now, with the orange, you're always thinking about saturation, how it's going to saturate. So it's going to saturate more where I left it white, and then it's going to fade up towards the top. So I'm going to drop it in. I don't really like to paint anything on, but I'm just dropping the color in. I did a lot of watercolor growing up. I took a lot of advanced watercolor courses in high school, and was going to pursue art. So this is a lot like watercolor painting. I'll get into, once I start staining this crown, I'll talk to you a little bit about Bob Ross, everything I learned about staining teeth, I learned from Bob Ross. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And so when I'm painting the orange, I'm kind of using the side of the brush to kind of go up the ridges, up the anatomy a little bit, and then I'm going back in. I mean, I go back in. If I put one coat in, I'm going to come back into the deepest parts and put another, just drop in that color and that saturation. And this is probably pretty similar to what you guys have seen. I don't know if anybody else is putting stains on the insides of their crown. Anybody besides the white or the opaque color maybe? Does anybody put stains or chroma on the insides of their crown? Seen any of that? Maybe a little bit. So that's what I'm going to do now. Well, let's do the interproximal triangles. On natural teeth, there tends to be a little bit more chroma underneath the contact area, a little bit of chroma saturation more than anywhere else. So I'm going to drop that in as little dots, a little kind of stippling effect. If you guys can see that. So underneath the contact area. I have a couple samples up here that you guys can pass around if you want to. Look at that. that I did the last couple days.
This is just for show at that point.
Yeah. What,
I'm just saying, you're never gonna see it once it goes in the mouth, so.
Yeah.
In approximate?
Depends on where you're looking. Depends on how you look. Yeah. Well, yeah, it could be for show, whatever. But I think you can kind of see it. So now I'm going to start dropping color on the inside. I look at the occlusal surface, and I am going to kind of look at the center of it and find the center, and I put a little dot there. That kind of gives me some direction. And I'm going to drop color across that central dissectional groove. And I started doing this maybe a year or so ago.
Because the projector is not.
Oh, the projector?
Put it
Oh,
on your
okay,
palm.
gotcha.
Put it in your palm and then go up to show.
Oh, to show.
Closer. If you want to show.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, so on the inside of the crown, I'm putting it on the central dissectional groove.
And this is all based on what thickness of that material?
On what you get a general thickness of how the dentist should be prepping the teeth, but sometimes you get pretty thick crowns sometimes, and that it kills the crown. If you have 2 millimeters, 1.5 millimeter reduction, this looks really, really good. People are like, why are you putting it on the inside? I just do one shade I did a test with one of the dentists I started working with. I started doing this on the inside of these crowns, and I did one crown without and one crown with, and it was pretty amazing with how it blended in the natural and the oral environment. It just popped and picked up that color from underneath. So zirconia crowns are opacious, even some translucent zirconia that they claim. When you put it in the mouth, it looks great and translucent in the model, but when you put it in the mouth, it just, all your characterization goes away and it just looks opaque, but not what I've seen. These dentists prescribe this over lithium disilicate now. I get my dentists, they don't do Emax anymore because this looks better in the mouth. So that's a win for me because it's a lot less production. So I 2 or 3 coats on with this orange can look pretty good. Make sure that you're using the corresponding orange. I actually mix a medium orange and then an extra light orange by mixing orange light and orange standard 50-50. I put a medium color for like A1, B1. Standard could be a little bit dark for A1, and then light can be maybe a little bit too light for A1. That's my own kind of preference. So there's the orange. Actually, there's one thing I do. The stark line around the margin, you guys notice in zirconia, you can see that line. So one thing to help reduce that, I think, I put color orange on the inside of the margin, chroma. So that naturally at the gingival, it's a little bit more chromatic there because the dentin shows through a little bit more, and sometimes you get some orange cervical translucency. So I put orange on the inside of the margin. Sometimes on the outside. If it's like an A3, A2 incisal, you get those shades where the dentist says, oh, it's A3 gingival, A2 incisal. So anything that he says after, I'm going to be dipping it in A2, I'm going to apply the A3 with a brush. So, or I put a little bit of chroma at the gingival. So if you guys can see that, I put a little bit of, it's a little bit blurry right there. Orange on the inside. And you can see it on any of the crowns. Okay, then I'm getting ready to dip. So all my chroma, all my incisal translucency, maybe I put some violet and blue on there. Maybe I put some brown down in the deepest part. I've done that before. But we can do that with the stains. So then you dip in whatever shade you use, A2. When you're dipping, to create consistency, you're going to want to keep track of how long. I have a timer, like a 30-second timer, where I start it as soon as I drop it in, and then I take it out about 15 seconds, and then I dab it dry with a paper towel or a tissue, and then you blow off the excess. If you don't blow off that excess is going to absorb and saturate, and you're going to get inconsistencies in your shading. People say, oh, none of my A2s look the same. They're all looking different. Daniel? Is he in here? Oh, okay. Got a screen. So anyway, so you have to keep track of that time. So at the end of 30 seconds, it's going off while I'm drying it most of the time. So then you put it in a toaster oven about 350 to, don't go above 400 degrees. I find that you get maybe cracks and it's a little bit too hot. 350 about is a good temperature for about 25 to 30 minutes, depending on how many crowns you have in there. Maybe take a little 30 minutes. If it's 3 or 4 crowns, maybe 25 minutes. So you put that in there and then put it in your sintering oven. Once you get it out of the sintering oven, how many of you guys, what kind of stains do you guys use? You guys use any Ivoclar stains probably? Soprano, good for you. Good man. That's what I use. Soprano, good. And that's, I think, you have the most control over. And we're going to show you why. So we're going to get, this is a test that I do with all of my glaze pastes. You take the glaze paste or the foundation, whatever the foundation is going to be, and you stir it up, you mix it up. I never add liquid unless it dries out. Soprano doesn't tend to dry out at all. I haven't really had any Soprano. It gets a little chunky sometimes, but never really dries out like the luster paste does, and sometimes the Mio, the in-sync. So this is the in-sync. This is a test that I do. You want to see how much elasticity it has. There's 2 parts to these systems. There's the binder, and then there's the porcelain. So the most critical things is how soft or how sticky or how thick the binder is, and how small or how large the particle size has a lot to do with the handleability, and also how it fires. It could fill in your texture, fill in your anatomy. You don't want that to happen. So there's some I don't use. Like, I used to use in-sync. I used to use Mio, but now I don't use it anymore. So watch this. This is called the elasticity pull test. Pull it, and right where it breaks, that's about where I stop. It's about 1.5 to 2 inches on the in-sync. I'm looking at the elasticity. This is going to affect the control and handling of it. So here's luster paste. Luster paste has a very soft binder, but very big porcelain particles. It's kind of deceptive. It's thick, but it's not because the binder is thick and sticky. See, it breaks almost immediately. So it's very difficult to control. Porcelain particle size is very difficult to handle. It just is chunky. It's like you're spreading chunky peanut butter on when you're expecting creamy peanut butter. So now here, let's do Annex Dent. The one I use now, you want a thick, on your crowns you want a thick consistency, but you want a very, very thin layer, because we are putting color on top of this material. So I mean, I'm like 3.5, 4 inches off the jar. That's how sticky and thick this Annex Dent material is. And that is going to be your friend. But a lot of people think that, oh, this is way too thick to spread on a crown. I'm going to thin it out with some liquid, and then you blow it. It's going to go all down to the margin. All your color you put on there is going to be sloppy and messy, and it's going to go all to the gingiva. You're not going to have any control over it. It's going to go all in your anatomy and fill in all your anatomy you spent time grinding out. So this stuff, let's get right to it. You put it on. All right, a lot of you guys were asking me about the Annex Dent, the Rely-On piezo brush. I don't make any money from them. I just like it. I just love it. So tell them that I sent you. They won't give you a discount. They will probably charge you more. Tell them Dan sent you. Tell Tay. Tay's the taller gal with the glasses. Tell her I sent you, and then I'll tell her. I'm going to give you one more thing to tell her later. Okay, so Bob Ross, real quick. Bob Ross does a technique he made famous. It's called a wet-into-wet technique. He applies liquid paint to the surface of his canvas. And what that does is it makes the pigment that he puts on the canvas, he has more control over it, blends better. The paints don't have any sharp, crisp edges as if you were to put it on a dry canvas. The way that he does it, he puts it on and then he tests it with his fingertips. If you could see paint going down into the crevices or the parts of your fingertips where it shows your fingerprint, that's too much. You thin it out, thin it out, thin it out, and then he puts his fingertips on it. If you could see your fingerprint, like you would a fingerprint, then that's enough. And that's about how what I think about when I'm applying it to a crown. You want the layer to be very, very thin. but you want the consistency to be very thick because you want to control all the colors going on it. Because you guys know that it can look really bad really fast. We're working on these things that are tiny, and most of us have to have loops or microscope to be able to even see the crown. So to be able to put detail on something so small can be difficult. So what I do first, before I do anything, I lightly sandblast a monolithic crown with 50 micron aluminum oxide. I don't sandblast anything I've done layered with porcelain. With this thing, what it does is it releases surface tension. You guys can see that? I don't know, you guys can't see it. I can't put it under there. The cord won't reach. But it's shooting out plasma. Have you guys seen those balls that have those lightning bolts and you put your hand on it, your hair goes up? That's what it looks like. And it smells like ozone, puts off ozone. So what it does is it relieves the surface tension. Between blasting it with aluminum oxide and using this brush, or this, it gets on your skin. It maybe tickles and smells like burnt skin, but it doesn't hurt. So that is going to be really, really critical into putting on how it behaves. It really will just suck in everything. I used to get chicken pox marks or little bubbles in your ceramic, and then you'd have to come in and fix them and try to grind them out, and it doesn't ever look good. So and you end up sandblasting it all off and doing it all over again. I don't get that anymore. And between doing this and bench drying everything, I have a little embossing gun that blows out hot air. I have on my bench, and I put everything that I've stained in front of that, and I dry it all bench. I don't let my muffle dry it or anything. I have a really short drying time, and it makes it's like 10 minutes. I shorten my program too. So I use liquid, wet into wet, Bob Ross technique. So I'm going to put this liquid on. This also relieves a little bit of surface tension. Put this, it just flows so well. This. Let's see, I can't really, there we go. This, I'm putting on the liquid that comes with the ceramic. I'm going to wipe this off. So I'm putting it on so I can wipe it off. The surface is going to be light, kind of, not really that wet, but I'm just relieving surface tension. That's all I'm doing. So then I kind of dab it. Okay, you can't even see. It's very, very light how much is left on the crown. That helps relieve surface tension. Okay, now I'm going to put my liquid glaze. I'm literally picking this up. I use a synthetic brush for this. Sable brushes you can't pick up because they're too soft and too flexible. So I'm going to apply this just like I would. Very thin layer, very thick consistency. And you guys, I'll be in the booth after this. I'm going to go down to the booth so you guys can try any of these stains. We can demo any of these stains. I was talking earlier with Steve about zirconia. You guys know the difference. The reason why I use B&D, I've tried dozens and dozens and dozens of translucent zirconia, what they call translucent. It used to be that you used to have translucent zirconia was about 650 to 750 megapascals, and then you'd have a stronger zirconia. The doctor would say, I want the strong zirconia. It's more opacious, but it's stronger. And so you would have to kind of give up strength for translucency. But when they came out with Beyond Plus, it was like a game changer. I order one zirconia, and I have one zirconia that I use. I use multi-layer for some layering and some bridges. I use white primarily for singles. So I'm putting this on, but I'm putting it on very, very thin. Thick consistency, very thin layer. Same with, and it's almost to the point where, like that liquid gesso, this is like that layer. You want to see your fingerprints, but you don't want that paint or that glaze to go down into the deepest part of your fingerprints. All right. So in the anatomy, on the occlusal surface, I put less than I even put on because you're going to add chroma. You're going to add color to the surface of this crown. You don't want this to be that thick at all. You're going to want this. This is just so your pigments can move around and that they stay where you put them. They're not going to collect in the anatomy, and they're not going to collect at the margin. All these other ones I had issue. This Mio is great. It can look really good, but ever since Annextent came out, I have complete control over this stuff because it's so thick. And Mio doesn't have any of the, they're kind of limited on their surface colors. But Soprano has surface color for almost every stain color. So you only do enamel effects with the structure material of Mio, and the surface materials of Annextent. You have a lot more options with what you can do. And the pink, if you guys do all on fours or any gingiva, the pink matches their composite, the Annextent. So that's kind of cool too. So when you're doing all on fours, you use the same pink for. All right, so now I'm gonna add the chroma, the gingiva. So when I add this, a little bit goes a long way. You're doing that staining prior to adding this, so you're getting the color close, maybe a half a shade lighter, a half a shade off. But what you're gonna do to add the chroma is very lightly, like I said, thick consistency, very thin layer. Since I added very thin layer of that glaze, I don't have to even add much chroma. You want to have, once you start if you get a lot of glaze on there, you guys have done it with Mio or with anything else, it starts to run towards the margin and go into your anatomy. This stuff just stays where you put it because you've controlled the surface tension with the piezo brush. It really, really helps with the surface tension and having complete control over the material. So now what I do, I put it on pretty thick, but then I blend it with a dry brush. Kind of blend it and fade it up towards the transitional area, kind of in between the enamel and the dentin, transition dentin, if you will. So I'm going to be blending it up towards that. Maybe it's hard to see with this, but you guys can. Let me see if I can show you so far. Probably not, but no. Let's go like this. No, a little bit better. You guys can come up and see the samples and see a little bit more about what I'm doing. So now I've dropped the chroma in the occlusal surface, down in the fissures, and then I kind of blend it up on the ridges. So it's going to be kind of accentuating the color from that underneath color, the internal color, the orange, and kind of blending in with that. Like I said, it's about layers, making it appear to have layers, like a layered ceramic crown does. So chroma on the fossa, coming up over the ridges. It's hard to see, but you can kind of see it there. Okay, then my enamel color. I'm going to add, you can add blue, but Annextent doesn't have, this is the only Mio color I still use. Smoke, translucent, or smoke, yeah. Where is it? Translucent smoke. Smoke, yeah, translucent smoke. It's kind of a violet color. Any of you guys know the Willie Geller illusion color creation? Anybody know the theory behind that? It's actually a color theory, color principle. You take equal parts red to equal parts blue to equal parts yellow, and you get kind of this violet color. What it does is it creates this illusion. Your eyes can't kind of perceive depth. It tricks your eyes. It's like those pictures where you have to cross your eyes and fuzz your eyes to be able to see the image. It's kind of similar to that. Your eyes can't perceive the depth of it because of the colors. They kind of counterbalance each other in theory and in the color principle. So that's kind of what that's why it's called illusion. Willie Geller called it illusion. That's the story I heard anyways. So I've never talked to the guy, never met the man, but I can't verify that story. So, but I've tried it. I've mixed it with watercolor paints like that. So this smoke color I put all the way around the incisal edge, kind of frame the occlusal surface, occlusal table, And then I go about 1 millimeter down on the incisal and just highlight that translucency. You've already put that translucency in with the enamel. This is creating that depth again, like I was talking about, like it's layered. And you can go in with blue or gray or whatever the color calls for. I like this violet color on anything like an A2. Anything. A lot of Ivoclar has a violet color that's really nice. It's a little bit too light. I think I use the violet Ivoclar on a lighter shade or a bleach shade to get that enamel translucency. All right, so I blend a lot because you have that thickness and have that control over the surface tension. I dry my brush off with my fingertips and I come in and pull out anything that's got too much puddling anywhere, or I blend the color if it's starting to kind of stay in one area or I don't apply it properly. I blend. Because you have control over it, you can blend it. All right, then, so really critical part, I put there's a cotton color, or I think I used the cream color, but I only have cotton today. I use white on the cusp ridges, cusp tips, kind of a vanilla cream color to create depth again. So these whitish, these highlights on this tip are gonna kind of pop, gonna come towards you. I start in the ridges. Any of the ridges I'm gonna highlight. I'm gonna start in the deepest part and bring it up and fade it up towards the top. Maybe highlight the occlusal table with a whitish color, and then blend it. Really critical to blend it so that it looks natural. When you fire it, it'll fade a little bit and blend a little bit more. But this really kind of adds that other dimension, that other layer, per se. So whitish on the cusp tips. And again, I'll be at the booth down there if you guys want to come and try any of these stains or look at anything else. GC1, the IQ skin, have you guys tried that stuff? It's really cool. I've tried almost every kit I can get my hands on. I've tried probably about 15 or 20 different monolithic one-fire kits, whatever you want to call it. Not a lot of them have been produced the way that Mio and Annextent has, the soprano material. They really, really did their research, and they're really smart the way that they set those up. All right, so I use a powder to put the stains in the fissures, the fissure stains. I use a powder because you have a lot of control. An endophile right here. I've created this little tool that I made, and I get it a little bit wet. Sometimes I run it through the occlusal, the anatomy, and then that gets the very tip of it a little bit wet, so I can pick up a little bit of this powder. The powder, you have a lot more control over how it looks. It could look darker in the deepest part, and you can blend it and fade it up over the top of the ridges. It'll kind of dissipate a little bit, more like natural teeth, natural stain look. And it highlights and it adds another dimension of depth. So I start in the pits and the fissures, and I drag it up towards the top. And then I come in with a dry brush and kind of break it up. You don't want any kind of just straight line or one continuous line. You want to kind of break it up so that it looks how natural stain looks. And so come in with a dry brush, lick it, and then break up that line a little bit in certain spots. Okay? And then I bench dry these, like I said, you guys. And I don't get any pock marks, no tearing, no ripping, no bubbles, nothing anymore. Ever since I started using that plasma brush gun and started bench drying everything. see if you can kind of see this. There we go. So come up and see it. Take a look at it. You got to kind of see how, I wonder if you can see it on this one. Anyways, you can see that orange chroma through it. If you hold it up to the light, you can really see how it blends and how it just kind of disappears. You can really see it in the mouth. Do one of your best doctors, one of your best accounts that you have a good communication with, tell him you're going to do one crown that you don't put that orange in, don't put any of those effects on. Just give him a straight shaded crown and then put the effects on. People are like, does this really matter? Is it really going to show up that much? For me, it has. It's changed a lot of the way that my doctors prescribe. They don't prescribe anything monolithic without it looking like this. So you guys come check it out. I'll be down in the booth doing a demo hands-on. Come look, come try any of these shades, any of the stains. Thank you. Got to get going for the next lecture here. Thank you for you guys' time. Come on down. Thanks.